My daughter wanted me in the cheapest nursing home possible. I'm Frank Miller, and I'm 72 years old. What Jessica didn't know was that for 5 years, she'd been paying my mortgage on a house I never actually owned. She thought she was helping her poor, widowed father stay afloat. She thought she was securing her inheritance. She thought she had all the power. She was wrong on every count. You see, when someone assumes you're weak, desperate, and dependent, they stop paying attention to the details. They stop asking the right questions. And they definitely stop reading the fine print. My daughter learned that lesson the hard way when I sold our family home for exactly $1. The look on her face when she realized what I'd done, priceless. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. This story starts 3 months after my wife Margaret passed away. Margaret's death hit me harder than I expected. 20 years of marriage, and suddenly I was eating dinner alone every night in our big colonial house. The medical bills from her final 6 months were staggering, $89,000, even with Medicare. Jessica showed up to the funeral in her black BMW designer dress, the whole pharmaceutical sales rep package. She'd done well for herself, pulling in $78,000 a year plus bonuses. Her husband Brad worked in commercial real estate development. Together they lived in a McMansion worth twice what our modest home was worth. "Dad, we need to talk about your situation," she said the day after we buried Margaret. I was sitting at the kitchen table going through bills. My Social Security check was $18.50 a month. Margaret's pension had died with her. The stack of medical bills seemed to grow every day. "What situation is that, honey?" Jessica sat down across from me, pulled out a folder. "Always organized, my daughter. Always prepared. Your financial situation. Mom's medical expenses wiped out most of your savings. This house is too big for you now. The property taxes alone are killing you." She wasn't wrong about the numbers. On paper, I looked broke. "I've been thinking," she continued, "maybe it's time to downsize. Something smaller, more manageable. Maybe a nice senior community." I nodded slowly. "What did you have in mind?" "Well, I found this place called Sunset Manor. It's very affordable, $3,200 a month. They handle everything, meals, activities, even basic medical care. $3,200 a month. I'd visited Sunset Manor once to see an old friend. Shared rooms, institutional food, understaffed. The smell of disinfectant couldn't quite cover the smell of despair. That's thoughtful of you to research that. I know it's a big decision, Dad, but honestly, I'm worried about you rattling around in this big house all alone." The second sign of being underestimated came 2 weeks later. Jessica arrived with boxes and bubble wrap. "I thought I'd help you start going through Mom's things. Get a head start on the downsizing process." She walked into Margaret's closet like she owned the place, started pulling out jewelry, photographs, family heirlooms. "This necklace would look beautiful on me. Mom always said it would be mine someday." That necklace was Margaret's grandmother's, worth about $15,000, though Jessica probably didn't know that. And these old photo albums, we should probably just scan the important ones and throw the rest away. No point keeping all this clutter. Those albums contained 4 generations of Margaret's family history. Margaret had spent years organizing them, writing little notes on the back of each photo. "Dad, you seem so overwhelmed by all this stuff. It's probably better if I just handled the sorting for you." I watched my daughter methodically box up my late wife's belongings like she was cleaning out a storage unit. Not once did she ask what I wanted to keep. Not once did she consider that these weren't just objects to me. "Jessica, slow down a bit. I'm not going anywhere tomorrow." "I know, Dad, but the sooner we get this done, the sooner you can start your new chapter. Think of it as a fresh start." A fresh start. Like Margaret's death was just an inconvenience to be cleared away. That night, after Jessica left with 3 boxes of Margaret's things, I sat in my empty house and made a phone call. "Helen, it's Frank Miller, Margaret's husband. I think it's time we had that conversation." The woman on the other end of the line was Margaret's family attorney, Helen Davis. We'd met briefly at the wedding 20 years ago, and again when Margaret updated her will. "Frank, I've been wondering when you'd call. Are you ready to discuss the trust arrangements?" "But, I think I am." "Good. Can you come to my office tomorrow? We have quite a bit to review." As I hung up the phone, I wondered what Jessica would think if she knew about that call. But then again, Jessica had never bothered to ask about Margaret's family background. Some mistakes cost more than others. The stakes became crystal clear on October 1st. Jessica scheduled what she called a family meeting. She arrived with Brad and a manila folder thick with paperwork. I made coffee and we sat in the living room where Margaret and I used to watch the evening news together. Dad, we need to make some decisions. Jessica's voice had that professional tone she used with difficult clients. It's been 6 months since Mom passed. You can't keep living in denial about your financial situation. Brad leaned forward, his real estate developer instincts kicking in. Frank, this house is sitting on a gold mine. The property alone is worth $420,000. In this market, you could get asking price, maybe more. We've done the math, Jessica added, sliding papers across the coffee table. After paying off the mortgage, you'd net enough to cover 5 years at Sunset Manor, with money left over. I looked at the papers. House appraisal, dated October 15th. Nursing home contract, already filled out with my name. All I had to do was sign. You've been busy, I said. We've been worried, Jessica corrected. Dad, you're 72 years old. What if you fall? What if you have a medical emergency? There's nobody here to help you. I have neighbors, friends from church. Brad shook his head. That's not the same as professional care. Sunset Manor has nurses on staff 24/7. Plus, Jessica added, you wouldn't have to worry about maintenance, property taxes, any of that stress. Everything would be taken care of. I sipped my coffee. The house felt different with them in it. Smaller, somehow. What if I said no? The question hung in the air. Jessica and Brad exchanged glances. Dad, that's not really an option anymore. Jessica's voice got harder. You're behind on the property taxes. The roof needs work. The contractor estimated $12,000. The furnace is 20 years old. The foundation has that crack in the basement that's getting worse every year. She was right about all of that. The house did need work. And frankly, Brad chimed in, the neighborhood's changing. Property values might not stay this high forever. You need to sell while the market's hot. How long do I have to decide? 30 days, Jessica said. She wasn't asking. I've already spoken to the real estate agent, Janet Morrison from Coldwell Banker. She's the best in the area. She can have the house listed by November 1st. 30 days. Margaret had been gone 6 months, and now they wanted to erase the last 20 years in 30 days. The Sunset Manor contract needs to be signed by Halloween, Jessica continued. That gives us time to coordinate the move. I've already put down a deposit to hold your spot. You put down a deposit? Without asking me? Dad, the waiting list is 6 months long. I had to act fast, or you'd miss your chance. I stared at the contract. Sunset Manor, shared bathroom, meals at 5:30. Lights out at 10. No guests after 8 p.m. What if I wanted to look at other options? Maybe something a little nicer? Jessica sighed. Dad, we've been through this. Your budget is what it is. Sunset Manor is what you can afford. But that wasn't true, not even close. Golden Years Estate, the luxury senior community across town, charged $8,500 a month. Private suites, gourmet dining, concierge service. Margaret and I had toured it once, just out of curiosity. Beautiful place. If I was really the broke widower Jessica thought I was, then yes, Sunset Manor was my only option. But I wasn't broke. Not even close. I just looked broke. 30 days, I repeated. 30 days, Jessica confirmed. I know it's scary, Dad. Change always is. But this is for the best. You'll see. After they left, I walked through the empty house. Every room held memories. The kitchen where Margaret taught me to make her grandmother's apple pie. The living room where we'd watched our wedding video every anniversary. The bedroom where she'd died in her sleep, holding my hand. They wanted to reduce all of that to a line item on a real estate listing. I picked up my phone and dialed Helen Davis again. Helen, it's Frank. We need to move faster than I thought. What's happened? My daughter just gave me 30 days to sell the house and move into a nursing home. There was a long pause. Frank, does Jessica know about the trust? She doesn't know anything about anything, and I think it's time she learned. Are you sure you want to go down this road? Once we reveal the trust structure, there's no going back. I looked around my house, Margaret's house, our house. Except it wasn't our house. It never had been. Helen, I've been patient for 6 months. I've let my daughter treat me like a senile old man who can't manage his own affairs. I've watched her box up my wife's belongings like they were garage sale leftovers. And now? Now it's time for some hard truths. 3 days later, Jessica showed up unannounced with a woman I'd never seen before. Dad, this is Janet Morrison from Coldwell Banker. I thought you two should meet. Janet was all business. Tailored suit, leather portfolio, the kind of confident smile that said she'd sold 1,000 houses just like mine. She walked through my living room like she was already staging it. Mr. Miller, this is a lovely home. Great bones, original hardwood floors. With a little updating, this could move very quickly. Updating? Oh, just cosmetic things. New paint, modern light fixtures. Maybe update the kitchen appliances. Nothing major. Jessica jumped in. I already got estimates. We're looking at maybe 15,000 in improvements, but it'll add 30,000 to the sale price. We? I asked. Well, I'd handle the renovation costs up front, and we'd settle up at closing. Think of it as an investment in maximizing your return. An investment. In my own house. Janet pulled out her tablet, started taking photos. The master bedroom has beautiful natural light, and this kitchen, so much potential. Buyers love open concept. The kitchen's not open concept, I said. Not yet, Janet smiled. But we could take out this wall, create a beautiful flow between the kitchen and living room. Very popular with young families. She was talking about the wall where Margaret hung her grandmother's china cabinet. The wall where we'd marked our kids' heights when they were little. 20 years of memories, and Janet wanted to tear it down for flow. How long have you lived here, Mr. Miller? 20 years, since I married Margaret. Oh, that's nice. Was Margaret your wife? She was. I'm sorry for your loss, but I'm sure she'd want you to be practical about your future. That was the wrong thing to say. You knew my wife? Janet blinked. Well, no, but... Then don't tell me what she'd want. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Jessica stepped in quickly. Dad, Janet's just trying to help. We all want what's best for you. What's best for me is keeping my wife's memory intact. Dad, you're being emotional. This is business. Emotional? I stood up slowly. My wife died 6 months ago. Her daughter wants to put me in the cheapest nursing home she can find and tear down our kitchen for resale value. You think emotion's inappropriate here? Janet started putting her tablet away. Maybe I should come back another time. Maybe you should. Jessica's face flushed red. Dad, you're being unreasonable. Am I? Yes. You can't live in the past forever. Mom is gone. This house is too big for you. These are facts. Facts? Yes, facts. You can't afford to maintain this place. You can't afford the property taxes. You can't afford to be stubborn about this. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. When had she become so cold? Jessica, can I ask you something? What? Do you know anything about Margaret's family? The question caught her off guard. What do you mean? Her maiden name, where she grew up, what her parents did for a living. Jessica frowned. Dad, what does that have to do with anything? Humor me. I don't know. Anderson, I think? She grew up somewhere in Connecticut. Her parents were, I don't know, teachers? You never talked about them much. Teachers. Margaret's father had been a federal judge. Her mother came from old Connecticut money, the kind of family that had portraits in the library and trust funds that went back 3 generations. Did you ever wonder why Margaret never worked? She was a homemaker. That was her choice. Did you ever wonder how we afforded this house on my contractor's salary? Jessica's confident expression wavered. You had good credit. The market was different back then. Did you ever wonder why Margaret handled all our finances? Dad, what are you getting at? I walked to the mantel, picked up our wedding photo. Margaret in her grandmother's dress, me in a rented tux, both of us grinning like we'd won the lottery. Your stepmother wasn't just a homemaker, Jessica. She was a very wealthy woman who chose to live simply. What do you mean, wealthy? Just then, a black Mercedes pulled into the driveway. Through the window, I could see a man in an expensive suit, getting out, carrying a briefcase. Who's that? Jessica asked. That, I said, would be someone you should meet. The doorbell rang. I walked slowly to answer it, leaving Jessica and Janet standing in the living room, confusion written all over their faces. Mr. Miller? The man at the door was tall, silver-haired, with the bearing of someone used to being the smartest person in the room. I'm Thomas Anderson, Margaret's brother. I'd called Thomas the night before. It was time for him to make an appearance. Tom, come in. There are some people I'd like you to meet. Thomas walked into the living room like he owned it, which in a way he did. Jessica, this is Thomas Anderson, Margaret's brother. Tom, this is my daughter Jessica and her real estate agent, Janet. Jessica stared at Thomas like he was a ghost. Margaret had a brother? She had 3 brothers, actually. I'm the youngest. Thomas set his briefcase on the coffee table with a soft thud. We need to talk, Frank. About the trust. Janet cleared her throat. Maybe I should go. Maybe you should, I agreed. After Janet left, Jessica sat down heavily on the couch. What trust? Thomas opened his briefcase, pulled out a thick folder. The Miller Family Trust. Established by our father in 1978. Margaret was the primary beneficiary until her death, 6 months ago. I don't understand. It's simple, I said. This house doesn't belong to me, Jessica. It never did. The blood drained from my daughter's face. What do you mean? Thomas pulled out the property deed, placed it on the coffee table. This house belongs to the Miller Family Trust. Your stepmother was the sole trustee until her death. Now the trust is managed by... He looked at me expectantly. By me, I finished. And Tom here is the co-executor. Jessica picked up the deed with shaking hands. But you have a mortgage. I've been helping you pay it. No, I said quietly. You've been giving me money that you thought was going to mortgage payments. Money that went straight into my personal account. The truth hit her like a physical blow. How much? $180,000. Over 5 years. Jessica's face went white. I trusted you. And I trusted you to treat me with respect, to value my wife's memory, to ask questions before making assumptions. She stood up unsteadily. This is fraud. This, I said, is what happens when you stop paying attention to details. Thomas gathered up his papers. Frank, should I prepare the transfer documents we discussed? Yes, I think it's time. Jessica looked between us, confused and angry. What transfer documents? I smiled for the first time in months. You'll find out soon enough. The next morning, Jessica showed up at 7 a.m. I was having coffee and reading the obituaries, a habit I'd picked up since Margaret died. Dad, we need to talk. She looked like she hadn't slept. Good. Come in. Coffee's fresh. Jessica sat at the kitchen table, placed a manila envelope in front of me. I found this in Mom's desk. The envelope was marked M.A. Trust, Confidential, in Margaret's neat handwriting. You went through Margaret's desk? I was looking for insurance papers, for the nursing home application. Jessica's voice was defensive. What is this trust thing, and who exactly is Thomas Anderson? I sipped my coffee slowly. Margaret always made it too weak, but I'd learned to love it that way. Now I made it the same way, out of habit. Margaret's father was Judge William Anderson. Ever heard of him? No. He served on the Federal Court of Appeals for 30 years. Very prestigious position. Very well compensated position. Okay. Margaret's mother was Catherine Whitmore Anderson. The Whitmores founded Whitmore Industries back in 1925. Shipbuilding, then defense contracts during World War II. Later moved into commercial real estate development. Jessica's face was a mask of confusion. Dad, what does any of this have to do with our situation? Our situation is that you've been operating under false assumptions. I got up, refilled my coffee cup. Outside, my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, was walking her little terrier. Normal Tuesday morning, except nothing was normal anymore. When Margaret and I got married, she transferred this house into a family trust. Standard estate planning for people with significant assets. Significant assets? The trust is worth approximately $2.3 million. Jessica's coffee cup stopped halfway to her lips. $2.3 million? Give or take. Market fluctuations, you know. But you live like you're poor. You drive a 15-year-old Honda. You shop at Walmart. You clip coupons. Margaret liked living simply. She said money should be a tool, not a display. Then why didn't you tell me? Why let me think you were broke? I sat back down, looked my daughter in the eye. Because I wanted to see what kind of person you really were. The words hung between us like a challenge. What's that supposed to mean? It means that for 6 months, you've treated me like a burden, like a problem to be solved. You've made decisions about my life without consulting me. You've talked about me like I'm senile. Dad, I was trying to help. Were you, or were you trying to secure your inheritance? Jessica's face flushed. That's not fair. Isn't it? You've been paying my mortgage for 5 years. Money that went straight into my account. Did you ever ask to see the mortgage statements? Did you ever wonder why the balance never went down? I trusted you. You trusted that I was too stupid to deceive you. The truth of that statement settled over the kitchen table like a cold fog. Jessica opened the envelope, pulled out several legal documents: property deed, trust agreement, bank statements showing a balance that made her pharmaceutical salary look like pocket change. This says the house was transferred to the trust in 2003, before you and Mom were even married. We were engaged. Margaret wanted to make sure everything was legally clean. But the mortgage? There is no mortgage, Jessica. There never was. She stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. Then what was I paying? You were giving your poor, struggling father money to help him stay afloat. Money he deposited in his personal account and used however he saw fit. That's fraud. That's generosity. You offered to help. I accepted your help. I never lied about where the money was going. You implied... I implied nothing. You assumed everything. Jessica stood up abruptly, started pacing around the kitchen. This is insane. You let me think you were broke. You let me worry about you. You let me feel guilty about not doing enough. And what did you do with that guilt? I tried to help. You tried to control. There's a difference. She stopped pacing, turned to face me. What do you want from me, Dad? I want you to understand that respect isn't inherited. It's earned. And I haven't earned it? I thought about the past 6 months. The nursing home brochures, the boxes of Margaret's belongings, the real estate agent walking through my house like she owned it. What do you think? Jessica sat back down, buried her face in her hands. I don't know what to think anymore. Then maybe it's time you started asking better questions. I finished my coffee, stood up to leave the kitchen. At the doorway, I paused. Oh, and Jessica, you might want to cancel that deposit at Sunset Manor. I won't be needing it. The look on her face told me she was finally starting to understand that her 72-year-old father wasn't quite as helpless as she'd assumed, but she still had no idea what was coming next. Thanksgiving dinner at Jessica's house was supposed to be a celebration. 23 family members crammed into her dining room, the good china out, everything perfect for social media photos. I brought Margaret's famous apple pie recipe, made it myself, though it wasn't quite as good as hers. Dad-made pie, Jessica announced as I walked in. Her voice was artificially bright, the kind of cheerful that fooled nobody. Brad took my coat, gave me one of those firm handshakes that real estate developers practice in the mirror. Frank, good to see you. How are you holding up? I'm managing. The house was full of people I barely knew. Jessica's pharmaceutical sales colleagues, Brad's real estate buddies, a few distant relatives who showed up for the free food and football game. Dinner conversation was the usual small talk. Football scores, weather, somebody's vacation to Florida. I sat quietly, cut my turkey into small pieces, listened to my daughter play hostess. Frank's going through some big life changes, I heard her tell someone. Downsizing, simplifying. It's actually quite inspiring. Inspiring, like my wife's death was a lifestyle choice. After dinner, while people were having dessert and coffee, Jessica stood up and tapped her wine glass with a fork. Before everyone gets too comfortable, I wanted to share some family news. The room quieted down. 23 faces turned toward Jessica, who was standing at the head of the table like she was giving a corporate presentation. As most of you know, my stepmother, Margaret, passed away earlier this year. It's been a difficult adjustment for all of us, especially Dad. And she gestured toward me with that practiced smile. I kept eating my pie. Well, I'm happy to announce that Dad has made a wonderful decision about his future. Here it comes. Dad's going to be moving to a beautiful senior community called Sunset Manor. It's a place where he'll have 24-hour care, social activities, everything he needs to stay safe and healthy. Murmurs of approval around the table. That's wonderful, Frank. Such a smart choice. You'll love having everything taken care of for you. Jessica was just getting started. The truth is, Dad's been struggling more than he likes to admit. The house is too big for him now. The maintenance, the yard work, the isolation, it's just too much for someone his age. Someone his age. Like 72 was 92. And frankly, Jessica continued, her voice taking on that concerned daughter tone, I've been worried about Dad's judgment lately. Little things, but they add up. Forgetting to pay bill, leaving the stove on, getting confused about appointments. I hadn't forgotten a single bill payment in 50 years. Never left the stove on in my life. And the only appointment I'd missed was the one where she'd scheduled a real estate agent without telling me. The hardest part, Jessica said, her voice getting emotional now, is that Dad doesn't always recognize when he needs help. That's why families have to step in sometimes, make the hard decisions for the people we love. She was selling them a story. Poor, confused father, responsible daughter making tough choices, family duty, noble sacrifice. The audience was buying it completely. So Dad will be moving to Sunset Manor right after the holidays. The house will go on the market in January. It's going to be a fresh start for everyone. More murmurs of approval. Someone started clapping. Then everyone was clapping, looking at me with those sympathetic smiles people use for lost causes. Dad, would you like to say something? 23 faces looking at me, waiting for the grateful speech from the senile old man who was too addled to manage his own life. I stood up slowly, the way old men are supposed to stand up. Let them see what they expected to see. Thank you all for being here today, I said. My voice was quiet, uncertain, playing the part Jessica had written for me. It means a lot to have family support during difficult times. Nods of encouragement around the table. Jessica's been so helpful through all of this, so involved in my decision-making process. Dad's being modest, Jessica jumped in. I just did what any daughter would do. Yes, I said. You certainly did. I looked around the table at all those expectant faces. These people didn't know me. Didn't know Margaret. Didn't know anything about our life together. They were just here for the show. Before I sit down, though, I have a small announcement of my own. Jessica's smile flickered. Dad, you don't need to... Actually, I do. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper. I wanted to share some news about the house Jessica mentioned. The room went quiet again. You see, there's been a small misunderstanding about the property situation. Jessica seems to think I own the house Margaret and I lived in for 20 years. Don't you? Someone asked. No, actually. I never did. I unfolded the paper. Property deed with the Miller Family Trust clearly listed as owner. The house belongs to a family trust established by Margaret's family. I'm the trustee now, which means I control what happens to the property. Jessica's face had gone completely white. Dad, maybe we should discuss this privately. Oh, I think everyone should hear this, especially since you've just announced my moving plans to the entire family. I looked around the table, had their complete attention now. I called the real estate agent yesterday, Janet Morrison from Coldwell Banker, the one Jessica hired to sell my house. Dad, please. I told Janet the house was no longer available for sale. In fact, I told her I'd found a buyer. You could have heard a pin drop. A buyer? Brad asked. Heroes Haven Veterans Housing. It's a charity that provides transitional housing for homeless veterans. Wonderful organization. How much did they offer? Someone asked. $1. The silence stretched for about 10 seconds. Then everyone started talking at once. $1? That's insane. Frank, you can't be serious. Jessica was gripping her wine glass so hard I thought it might shatter. Dad, you can't sell the house for $1. That's not legal. Actually, it's completely legal. Thomas Anderson, Margaret's brother, he's an attorney. He handled all the paperwork. The sale closed this morning. That was a lie. The sale was scheduled for Monday, but Jessica didn't know that. But Dad, someone said, that house must be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. $420,000, according to the appraisal Jessica commissioned. Then why would you sell it for $1? I looked directly at my daughter. Because sometimes the most expensive thing you own is your dignity. The room erupted. Everyone talking, arguing, trying to understand what they'd just heard. Jessica sat frozen in her chair, staring at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. Dad, she whispered, what have you done? I've made a decision about my own property. Isn't that what you wanted? For me to take control of my life? The irony hung in the air like smoke from a fire everyone could smell, but nobody could see. Uncle Thomas, who'd been sitting quietly through the whole dinner, finally spoke up. Frank's absolutely right. It's his property to dispose of as he sees fit. But Uncle Tom, Jessica said desperately, he's not thinking clearly. The stress of losing Mom, the isolation, this isn't a rational decision. Thomas smiled. Jessica, your father is one of the most rational men I know, and one of the most patient. Patient? Yes, he's been waiting 6 months for you to ask the right questions about your stepmother's family, about the trust, about why a retired contractor could afford to live in a $400,000 house. The room had gone completely silent now. Everyone was looking between Thomas, Jessica, and me, like they were watching a tennis match. "What questions?" Jessica asked. I stood up again, this time without the old man performance. Questions like, who really owns this house? Where did the money come from? Why have you been paying a mortgage that doesn't exist? The color drained completely from Jessica's face. "That's right," I continued. "Every month for 5 years, you've been giving me half the money for a mortgage payment on a house I never owned. Money that went straight into my personal account." Gasps around the table. Someone whispered, "Holy shit." $180,000, Jessica. That's how much you've paid me over the years, thinking you were helping your poor, struggling father stay afloat. Jessica started crying. Not the dignified tears of a concerned daughter, but the ugly, desperate sobs of someone whose world was collapsing in real time. "I was trying to help," she choked out. "No," I said quietly. "You were trying to control. And now you know the difference." The silence in Jessica's dining room was deafening. 23 people staring at me like I'd just announced I was moving to Mars. Jessica wiped her eyes with her napkin, tried to compose herself. "Dad, you're not making sense. If you never owned the house, then who did?" "Margaret did, through the Miller Family Trust." I pulled out the folder Thomas had given me, spread the documents across Jessica's dining room table like I was dealing cards. Property deed, dated March 15th, 2003. Owner listed as Miller Family Trust, with Margaret Anderson Miller as sole trustee. Jessica picked up the deed with shaking hands. "But you lived there. You paid the mortgage." "There was no mortgage, Jessica." "That's impossible. I've been helping you with payments for 5 years. You've been giving me money, yes. Money that went directly into my personal checking account at First National Bank." I pulled out a bank statement, pointed to the deposits. "See? Every month, like clockwork. $1,800 from Jessica Miller Crawford. Deposited and spent as I saw fit." Brad leaned forward, his real estate brain trying to process what he was hearing. "Frank, are you saying the house was paid for? In full?" "Margaret's family bought it as a wedding gift. Cash purchase. No financing required. But why would you take money from Jessica if you didn't need it?" Good question. One I'd been asking myself for 5 years. "Because she offered, and I wanted to see what kind of person my daughter really was." The words hit Jessica like a physical blow. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I gave you a test, Jessica, and you failed." Thomas cleared his throat. "Maybe I should explain the family background." He stood up, walked to the head of the table like he was addressing a jury. "Lawyer habits die hard. Margaret Anderson Miller was the daughter of federal judge William Anderson and Catherine Whitmore Anderson. The Whitmores have been a prominent Connecticut family for 4 generations." Murmurs around the table. A few people pulled out their phones, probably Googling Whitmore Family Connecticut. But Margaret inherited a substantial trust fund when she turned 25. Conservative estimate, it was worth $800,000 in 1998. Today, with proper management, it's worth approximately $2.3 million. Someone whistled softly. Jessica just stared. When Margaret married Frank, she transferred her assets into a family trust. Standard estate planning for people of means. The house, the investments, everything went into the trust structure. "Why?" Jessica asked. "Tax benefits, asset protection, privacy." Thomas shrugged. "Rich people do rich people things." "But Dad never acted rich," someone said. "That was Margaret's choice," I explained. "She believed wealth should be private, understated. She drove a 10-year-old Toyota, shopped at Target, made her own lunches." "She made you clip coupons," Jessica said accusingly. "No, she made me appreciate the value of $1. There's a difference." I pulled out another document. "This is Margaret's will. Very simple. Everything goes to me, with specific instructions about how the trust should be managed." Jessica reached for the will, but I held it back. "Here's the interesting part. Margaret left detailed notes about each family member, including you." "What kind of notes?" "Character assessments. Recommendations for inheritance amounts based on observed behavior." The room went dead silent. You could hear the football game playing in the living room, crowd noise and commentary filtering through the walls. "Margaret watched how you treated me after she got sick, how you treated her during her final months, how you talked about money, about inheritance, about your future plans." Jessica's face was pale. What did she write? I opened the will to a specific page, found the section I was looking for. Quote, Jessica has shown herself to be impatient with suffering, dismissive of sentiment, and focused primarily on financial gain. While I hope she matures with time, I cannot recommend substantial inheritance at this time. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. She wrote that about me? She wrote that about your behavior. Margaret always believed people could change. How much did she leave me? I looked at the will again. Nothing. Jessica's sob was audible across the room. Nothing? Not nothing. The opportunity to prove yourself worthy of more. What does that mean? Thomas jumped in. It means the trust structure allows for discretionary distributions based on demonstrated character growth. In English, please. It means, I said, that I control the money now, and I decide who gets what, based on how they treat me and honor Margaret's memory. The power dynamic in the room had shifted completely. Everyone could feel it. Brad, ever the businessman, asked the obvious question. So what happens now? Now Jessica learns what it feels like to have no control over her financial future. Dad, please. For 5 years, you've made assumptions about my situation. You've treated me like a burden, a problem to be solved. You've talked about me like I was senile. I stood up, walked around the table until I was standing directly behind Jessica's chair. You've boxed up Margaret's belongings without asking what I wanted to keep. You've scheduled real estate agents to tour my house without permission. You've put deposits down on nursing homes without consulting me. I was trying to help. You were trying to hurry up your inheritance. The accusation silenced her. But here's what you never understood, Jessica. There was no inheritance to hurry. Margaret's money was never going to be yours automatically. I returned to my seat, gathered up the documents. The trust is structured as a charitable foundation with family beneficiaries. That means the money goes to worthy causes, with family members receiving distributions based on merit. What kind of worthy causes? Veterans housing, literacy programs, medical research, the kinds of things Margaret cared about. And family members? Get what they earn through demonstrated character and service to others. Jessica looked around the table desperately, like someone might rescue her from this conversation. Dad, I made mistakes. I know that now. But you can't punish me forever. I'm not punishing you, Jessica. I'm teaching you. Teaching me what? That respect isn't inherited. It's earned through actions. I pulled out one final document. This is the deed transfer for the house. Signed this morning, filed with the county clerk this afternoon. You really sold it for $1? I really did. To a homeless shelter? To Heroes Haven Veterans Housing. They'll turn it into transitional housing for homeless veterans. Men and women who served their country and fell on hard times. Brad was furiously calculating in his head. Frank, you just gave away $400,000. No, I just proved a point. What point? That money means nothing without dignity. I looked around the table at all those shocked faces. For 6 months, my daughter has treated me like I was worthless, like my opinion didn't matter, like my grief was an inconvenience. Dad, she assumed I was broke, desperate, and dependent. She was wrong on all counts. I stood up to leave. The house sale is final, and the nursing home deposit is forfeited. Jessica's 5 years of mortgage payments are non-refundable. But where will you live? Someone asked. I smiled for the first time all evening. Golden Years Estate, $8,500 a month. Private suite, concierge service, gourmet dining. How can you afford that? Turns out I'm not as poor as everyone thought. Jessica was crying again, but quietly now, the ugly realization settling in. Dad, what do you want from me? I want you to understand that your stepmother was a remarkable woman who deserved better than being treated like an obstacle to your inheritance. And then what? And then maybe we can talk about earning back some trust. I gathered my coat, headed for the door. 23 people watching me leave. Oh, and Jessica? That apple pie you complimented earlier? Margaret's recipe. I made it from memory. The last thing I heard as I closed the door was the sound of my daughter crying. But this time, nobody was rushing to comfort her. Monday morning, I drove to Helen Davis's law office for the final paperwork. Her firm occupied the top floor of a downtown building that screamed old money and older connections. Frank, you're sure about this? Helen asked as I signed the deed transfer documents. I've never been more sure of anything. The buyer's representative was a woman named Carol Martinez from Heroes Haven veterans, housing. Mid-40s, military bearing, the kind of person who got things done without drama. Mr. Miller, I want you to know how much this means to our organization. With housing costs what they are, finding suitable transitional facilities is nearly impossible. What will you do with the house? Convert it into a group home. 4 bedrooms, shared common areas, kitchen facilities. We can house 8 veterans at a time, help them transition back to independent living. Margaret would have liked that. The paperwork was surprisingly simple. Deed transfer, title insurance, charitable donation documentation for tax purposes. The IRS would give me a $419,000 tax write-off, which was worth about $120,000 in actual tax savings. The irony, Helen said as I signed the final document, is that this donation actually increases your net worth. How's that? Tax savings plus the removal of property maintenance costs. You'll save about $30,000 a year in expenses and taxes. Over 10 years, that's $300,000. So by giving away the house, I'd actually made money. Margaret would have appreciated the economics of that. My phone buzzed as we finished the paperwork. Text message from Jessica. Dad, please call me. We need to talk. I deleted the message without responding. Carol Martinez shook my hand as we left the law office. Mr. Miller, would you like to attend the dedication ceremony next month? We'd love to recognize your contribution. No thanks. I prefer to stay anonymous. What I didn't tell her was that I'd already made arrangements to be somewhere else next month. I drove straight from the law office to Golden Years Estate, 30 minutes across town, from my old working-class neighborhood to the area where doctors and lawyers lived in gated communities. Golden Years looked like a luxury resort. Manicured gardens, fountain in the circular driveway, valet parking for visitors. The lobby had marble floors and fresh flowers, nothing like the industrial carpeting and disinfectant smell of Sunset Manor. Mr. Miller, welcome to Golden Years. The director was a polished woman named Patricia Hoffman, who'd worked in high-end hospitality before moving into senior living. Are you ready to see your new home? My suite was on the 3rd floor, corner unit with windows overlooking the garden. 1,200 square feet, full kitchen, separate bedroom and living area. The furniture was elegant but comfortable, the kind of stuff Margaret would have chosen. The monthly fee includes all meals, housekeeping, transportation, and activities, Patricia explained. Plus, we have on-site medical staff, physical therapy, even a salon and spa. When can I move in? Whenever you're ready. Your first month's fee was processed this morning. $8,500, more than most people made in a month. But after 20 years of living modestly, I figured I'd earned some luxury. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Jessica. Dad, I understand you're angry, but we're family. Please don't do anything permanent until we talk. Too late for that conversation. I spent the afternoon getting oriented, toured the dining room, met some of the other residents, signed up for a few activities. The people here were different from the Sunset Manor crowd. Retired executives, former professors, widows who'd inherited wealth, people who could afford to age gracefully. At dinner, I sat with a retired federal judge named William Patterson and his wife Dorothy, a former museum director. Frank, what did you do before retirement? Dorothy asked. I was a contractor, mostly residential construction. That must have been rewarding work, building homes for families. It was, though my last project was a little different. Oh? I tore something down instead of building it up. They looked at me curiously, but I didn't elaborate. Tuesday morning, Jessica showed up at Golden Years unannounced. The front desk called my room. Mr. Miller, you have a visitor. Your daughter Jessica. Tell her I'm not available. She says it's urgent. Tell her I'm unavailable permanently. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Jessica calling from the parking lot. Dad, I'm not leaving until we talk. Then you're going to be here a while. I drove all the way across town. The least you can do is give me 5 minutes. Jessica, what part of this situation makes you think you're entitled to my time? Silence on the other end of the line. You spent 6 months treating me like an inconvenience. You made plans for my life without consulting me. You talked about me like I was senile. I apologize for that. Apologies don't undo actions. Dad, please. I know I made mistakes, but nothing. There are consequences for how we treat people. What consequences? You've already sold the house. You've already moved out. What more do you want? What did I want? Good question. I want you to understand that Margaret was a good woman who deserved respect. I want you to understand that elderly people aren't burdens to be managed. I want you to understand that assumptions have costs. And then what? And then maybe, if you prove you've learned something, we can discuss your future relationship with Margaret's trust fund. That got her attention. What do you mean? I mean that Margaret's will allows for discretionary distributions to family members who demonstrate character growth. How much money are we talking about? And there it was, still focused on the money. Jessica, the fact that that's your first question tells me you haven't learned anything at all. I hung up the phone and went down to lunch. Through the dining room window, I could see Jessica sitting in her BMW in the parking lot, crying. But this time, her tears weren't my problem to solve. The consequences started small, then snowballed. Jessica's marriage was the first casualty. Brad had calculated their finances based on Jessica inheriting the house. $400,000 in equity that was supposed to fund their lifestyle upgrade, their kids' college funds, their retirement planning. When that money evaporated, their budget collapsed like a house of cards. Brad's talking to a divorce attorney, Jessica told me during one of her increasingly desperate phone calls. He says I misrepresented our family's financial situation. Did you? I thought I knew what we were inheriting. I thought you owned the house. You thought wrong. Dad, my marriage is falling apart. Then maybe you should have asked more questions before making assumptions. The second casualty was Jessica's job. Pharmaceutical sales is a small world, and gossip travels fast. The story of the daughter who tried to put her wealthy father in a cheap nursing home while stealing his house became water cooler entertainment. My district manager called me into his office, Jessica told me, during another call I didn't want to take. Someone posted about our family situation on social media. It's gone viral in our industry. What did it say? That I'm a fraud. That I can't be trusted with client relationships if I can't handle my own family. The pharmaceutical industry runs on trust and relationships. Once your reputation is damaged, it's almost impossible to recover. They're not firing me, but they're reassigning my accounts, moving me to inside sales, 50% pay cut, from $78,000 a year to $39,000. Jessica's financial world was imploding in real time. The third casualty was Jessica's social standing. Brad's real estate colleagues had been at that Thanksgiving dinner. So had several of Jessica's pharmaceutical industry friends. The story spread through their social circles like a virus. Nobody returns my calls anymore, Jessica told me. Sarah Peterson won't even make eye contact at company meetings. The Hendersons canceled our New Year's Eve party invitation. Maybe they're busy. Dad, they think I'm a terrible person. They think I tried to steal from my own father. Did you? I thought I was helping. You thought you were controlling. There's a difference. The fourth casualty was Jessica's children's education plans. She'd been saving for their college funds, but those savings had been built on the assumption of a substantial inheritance. Without that money, and with her reduced income, the college plans needed dramatic revision. Emma's been accepted to Northwestern. Full tuition is $60,000 a year. We can't afford that anymore. Community college is an option. Dad, she's been planning on Northwestern since she was 14. Plans change. Sometimes character is built through disappointment. The fifth casualty was the most painful. Jessica's relationship with her own children. Emma and Michael had heard enough fragments of the family drama to piece together the basic story. Their mother had tried to put their grandfather in a nursing home while manipulating him financially. Emma won't speak to me, Jessica told me during what would be our last phone call. She says I'm a gold digger who tried to abuse an elderly person. 16-year-olds have a strong sense of justice. She's my daughter, and I'm your father. But that didn't stop you from treating me like a burden. Dad, please. I've lost everything. My house, my job, my marriage, my kids' respect. How much punishment is enough? I thought about that question for a long time. Jessica, this isn't punishment. These are consequences. There's a difference. What's the difference? Punishment is arbitrary. Consequences are earned. 6 months after Thanksgiving, I attended the dedication ceremony for Heroes Haven House. Despite telling Carol Martinez I preferred anonymity, I wanted to see what Margaret's house had become. The transformation was remarkable. What had been our family home was now a bright, welcoming space where 8 veterans were learning to rebuild their lives. There was a garden where Margaret's rose bushes used to be, a workshop where my old garage stood, a common room where our living room used to be. During the ceremony, a former Marine named David spoke about what the house meant to him. 6 months ago, I was sleeping under a bridge. Tonight, I'll sleep in a real bed, in a real home, surrounded by people who understand what I've been through. Margaret would have loved that. After the ceremony, I drove past Jessica's house. There was a for sale sign in the front yard. Brad had filed for divorce 3 months earlier. Jessica was moving to a small apartment across town, starting over with nothing but debt and regret. I felt sorry for her, but not sorry enough to fix her problems. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way, and some consequences can't be undone with apologies. A year later, I was reading the newspaper in the Golden Years dining room when Patricia Hoffman approached my table. "Frank, you have a visitor." Jessica stood in the doorway, looking smaller somehow. Older. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple business attire from Target or Walmart. "Hi, Dad." "Jessica." She sat down across from me, folded her hands in her lap, like a child waiting to be scolded. "I got a job, customer service at an insurance company. It's not much, but it's honest work." "Good for you." "I've been seeing a counselor, learning about boundaries, respect, assumptions, all the things I got wrong." I nodded but didn't speak. "I'm not here to ask for money. I'm here to apologize. For real this time." "Okay. I treated you like a burden when you were grieving. I made decisions about your life without asking what you wanted. I assumed you were weak and stupid and dependent." She paused, took a shaky breath. "I was wrong about everything, and I'm sorry." Apology accepted. "Is there any chance we could start over?" I thought about Margaret, about dignity, about the price of respect. "Jessica, earning trust takes time, but yes, there's a chance." She smiled for the first time in months. "Want to tell me about your new job?" And slowly, carefully, we began to build something new.